Picture this. Thousands of years ago, someone bends down by a river in ancient India and spots a tiny stone flashing in the sunlight. They don't know it yet, but what they're holding will become the most desired gemstone in human history. Here's the wild part. Diamonds were formed billions of years before humans even existed, sitting underground longer than mountains, waiting for that exact moment to be noticed. And when people finally did find them, they didn't just think they were pretty, they thought they were magical, powerful, even untouchable. In this video, we're diving into that very first discovery, where it happened, how it spread across empires, and why a simple pebble from a river would go on to change history forever. So let's rewind time way back. We're talking more than 3,000 years ago in the heart of ancient India. Picture the scene. A wide riverbank, the hot sun glinting off the water, and villagers panning through gravel and pebbles in search of something valuable. Maybe gold, maybe shiny stones. Then suddenly, there it is, a small crystal, unlike anything else in the pan. It's clear, it catches the sunlight like fire, and when it's rubbed against another rock, it doesn't scratch. It scratches the rock instead. That right there was humanity's first introduction to what we now call a diamond. Now here's the fascinating part. Historians can't pin down a single person's name for that first find. This happened way before written records. But what we do know is that India was the very first place on Earth where diamonds were discovered. Ancient riverbeds in regions like the Krishna, Godavari, and Penner valleys were the treasure chests. People found these stones in alluvial deposits, basically washed down by rivers from ancient volcanic pipes buried deep underground. Imagine stumbling on one of those without having any idea what you've just picked up. And these weren't rare one-off accidents. Over time, India became the world's only source of diamonds. If you saw a diamond anywhere in the world for more than 1,000 years, it had almost certainly come from an Indian river. Traders, rulers, and priests all looked to India as the mysterious land where these magical crystals appeared. But think about how strange it must have been for those first people. Here's this stone that doesn't break, doesn't dull, and shines even in the dim light of an oil lamp. It didn't look like gold or silver, which could be melted and shaped. It just was, raw, hard, and beautiful. To early civilizations, that made it more than just a shiny rock. It was a puzzle, maybe even a gift from the god. And that curiosity, that was the spark, the very beginning of humanity's obsession with diamonds. All right, so imagine this. You're living in ancient India. Word has started to spread that these weird, clear stones pulled from the rivers aren't just unusual, they're special. They're harder than anything else. They don't break, and when polished a little, they shine like captured lightning. Naturally, the first people who wanted to get their hands on them weren't ordinary villagers anymore. It was the rulers, the priests, and the wealthy elite. By the 4th century BC, we actually start seeing these stones written about in old Sanskrit texts, like the Arthashastra. This wasn't just a random note in history. It shows that diamonds were important enough to be used as currency and tax payments. Imagine handing a rough diamond to your king as tribute instead of coins. That's how valuable they had become. Only royalty and the powerful could afford them. To everyone else, diamonds were almost mythical. And here's the fascinating part. Before people even thought about diamonds as jewelry, they thought of them as magical objects. Ancient Hindus believed diamonds held divine protection. Wearing one could shield you from evil spirits, fire, even poison. Warriors were convinced a diamond could make them invincible in battle. And in Greece, philosophers like Plato speculated that diamonds were actually living beings, tiny fragments of stars or even the bones of gods. The word itself, diamond, comes from the Greek adamas, meaning unbreakable. Pretty fitting, right? The Romans picked up on the hype too. Pliny the Elder, a Roman naturalist in the 1st century AD, famously wrote, "Diamond is the most valuable, not only of precious stones, but of all things in this world." That's not a poet talking. That's a scientist of his age, ranking diamond above gold, silver, or anything else. And on the lighter side of mythology, the Romans even said that Cupid's arrows were tipped with diamonds, because what else could explain love being so unstoppable? So you can see the shift happening here. What started as a curious rock in the mud had become something entirely different, a symbol of power, mystery, and the divine. Diamonds weren't just admired, they were feared, worshipped, and fought over. To the ancients, these weren't gemstones. They were talismans, cosmic gifts that proved you were chosen, protected, or destined for greatness. And that reputation is exactly what carried diamonds forward. from sacred relics into royal treasures. Now that diamonds had this aura of magic and power, the question is, what did people actually do with them? Remember, this is long before anyone figured out how to cut and shape a diamond, so these early gems weren't sparkling in rings or necklaces yet. They were used in their raw, natural crystal form, and that made them feel even more mysterious. In ancient India, one of the earliest uses was deeply religious. Diamonds were often placed into the eyes of statues of gods, glowing faintly in temple light, symbolizing divine vision. Imagine stepping into a dark temple lit by oil lamps and seeing a deity's gaze literally sparkle back at you. For worshippers, that wasn't just decoration. It was a direct sign of the god's power shining through. At the same time, rulers treated diamonds like portable treasure. They were stacked in royal treasuries, used as tribute, and even passed as a form of currency. To give you an idea of how serious that was, the Arthashastra, that same Indian text from the 4th century BC, mentions diamonds being accepted as tax payments. That's right, you could pay your taxes in diamonds. No wonder kings hoarded them, like dragons' gold. But diamonds weren't just ornaments or money, they were tools too. Thanks to being the hardest natural material on Earth, early artisans used them to engrave other gemstones and metals. Think of a jeweler etching designs into a ruby using the tip of a diamond crystal. That practicality only made them seem more supernatural, a stone that could literally carve anything else. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and diamonds had crossed into Europe, where they were mostly prized as uncut crystals. For centuries, they were left just as nature made them, set into crowns or ceremonial objects in their raw form. The first big leap into jewelry came in 1074, when the Queen of Hungary decorated her crown with uncut diamonds. That moment was like a fashion revolution. It marked the first time we see diamonds as part of royal regalia. Imagine the statement it made. Our crown isn't just gold, it carries the rarest stones on earth. After that, diamonds slowly began appearing in more crowns, daggers, and treasures of the nobility. So by this stage, diamonds had gone from river pebbles to sacred temple offerings to imperial status symbols. They weren't yet the glittering faceted jewels we know today, but their mystique and prestige were undeniable. To own one was to send a clear message. You had divine favor, immense wealth, or royal blood. Up until now, diamonds were pretty much an Indian secret. For more than 1,000 years, if you saw a diamond anywhere in the world, it had almost certainly been pulled from a river in India. But word travels fast when something is this rare and powerful, and soon diamonds began their journey across the world. One of the earliest moments we know about comes in 327 BC, when Alexander the Great invaded India. Legend has it he didn't just bring back spices and elephants, he also brought back a handful of diamonds. Imagine his soldiers staring at these unbreakable stones, whispering about their strange powers as they carried them back to Greece. That was probably the first time Europe ever laid eyes on a diamond. From there, diamonds trickled out through the Silk Road in trade caravans. Merchants tucked them alongside silk, spices, and gold, passing them through Persia, Arabia, and eventually into Europe. Picture camel caravans trudging through deserts, a few rough crystals hidden away in a pouch, tiny but more valuable than all the cargo combined. By the Middle Ages, Venetian traders had started bringing diamonds into European markets, and by the 1400s, diamonds had become fashionable among the elite. Kings and queens weren't just satisfied with gold crowns anymore. They wanted that rare sparkle too. Meanwhile, diamonds also spread eastward, making their way into China and other parts of Asia as symbols of wealth and protection. No matter the culture, the story was the same. If you had a diamond, you had status. You had something almost supernatural in your possession. And here's the kicker. For centuries, India remained the only source. Think about that. Every diamond in a medieval crown, every gem whispered about in a royal court, every talisman worn by a noble, it all traced back to those rivers in India. That monopoly lasted until the early 1700s, when explorers struck new deposits in Brazil, suddenly flooding the market with fresh stones. And then, in 1866, a boy in South Africa found a shiny pebble that turned out to be a diamond, and the modern diamond rush was born. From then on, the world would never look at diamonds the same way again. But it all started with that ancient trail, from Indian rivers to Greek conquerors, to caravans crossing deserts, to crowns in Europe. Diamonds were no longer just India's secret. They were on their way to becoming the most coveted gemstones on Earth. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. That very first diamond discovery somewhere on a riverbank in ancient India set off a chain reaction that still shapes our world today. From that single spark of curiosity, humanity began a love affair with diamonds that's lasted for thousands of years. Those early finds gave birth to myths of invincibility and divine power. They filled temples, lined royal treasuries, and eventually crowned kings and queens. By the Middle Ages, they were symbols of absolute status. And by the 1400s, diamonds had become fashionable enough to make their way into the very first diamond engagement ring, given in 1477 by Archduke Maximilian of Austria to Mary of Burgundy. That moment started a tradition that still defines love and commitment centuries later. As centuries rolled on, new diamond sources rewrote history. Brazil's deposits in the 1700s opened the market, and then the South African diamond rush in the 1800s changed everything, launching the modern diamond industry. Out of those discoveries came the rise of diamond cutting, the De Beers empire, and the worldwide demand we see today. And now, we've taken it even further. We can even create diamonds in a lab, mimicking nature's process that once took billions of years. But here's the thing. No matter how far we've come, the magic hasn't changed. The same qualities that amazed that first villager in India, the hardness, the brilliance, the mystery, still captivate us now. Diamonds are used in high-tech lasers, in space research, and of course, in the jewelry that marks our most important moments. They're both science and symbol, both ancient artifact and modern icon. So next time you see a diamond sparkle, remember, you're not just looking at a pretty gemstone. You're looking at a crystal born billions of years ago, discovered thousands of years ago, and cherished ever since. From a quiet river in India to rings on millions of hands around the world, diamonds have been with us through every chapter of human history. And all of it started with that first discovery, the moment someone picked up a shining pebble and changed the story of gemstones forever.